My wife told me she was going to her friend's house. He smiled at me before leaving, as he did every night. He looked me in the eyes, kissed me sweetly and repeated the same, "I love you," as always, the one I used to believe without hesitation. But that night, something in his voice struck me as empty. It wasn't the first time I said I was going to their house, and maybe it wasn't the first time I was an idiot for believing it. The feeling that something was wrong burned inside me, gnawed at my thoughts, and I could no longer ignore it. So, I followed her. My hands were steady on the steering wheel, but my heart was racing with every kilometer. The streets she walked down were familiar, but the direction didn't lead to any friend's house. At least, not from a friend I knew. My stomach turned when I saw her car parking in front of a discreet hotel, one of those that hide on the corners of the city, frequented by those who want to hide. My breathing became heavy as I watched her get out of the car. And then, he appeared. Tall, confident, hands in his pockets as if that were his territory. My blood boiled. She smiled at him. Not just any smile. A smile of someone who is happy, of someone who feels alive. A smile I hadn't seen in months. He grabbed her waist and pulled her close. She didn't resist. On the contrary. His hand slid down his chest, as if it belonged to him, not me. My chest tightened, as if something inside me was being crushed. And then, they entered together. They disappeared through the hotel doors as if they were a couple, as if she had never belonged to another man. My body was shaking. My heart wanted to jump out of my chest. My hands were sweating so much that I could barely hold the steering wheel. Every second I spent standing there, looking at that hotel, made me feel like a spectator of my own downfall. Every step she took away from me was like a stab, and I didn't even have the strength to react. But I knew one thing, I couldn't leave it like that. I couldn't be the one who is deceived, trampled on, thrown aside. No. I needed to do something. And that night, I made a decision. A cruel decision. She returned home in the early hours of the morning, barefoot, her hair messy, her face still shining with pleasure. He entered without making a sound, as if he knew he should hide his return. But I was there. Sitting in the room. The silence between us was an abyss. When our eyes met, she hesitated. His smile faded. She felt it. She knew. "Where were you?" My voice cut the air like a blade. She blinked quickly, tried to compose herself. His mind worked quickly to create a lie. I knew this because I knew her better than anyone. But there was no right answer to that question. Not for me. At Amanda's house, he lied, his voice wavering. Hatred rose up in my throat like a suppressed scream. I looked at her mouth that had kissed another man, at her hands that had touched another body. As if it were the most natural thing in the world. As if my entire life hadn't been shattered that night. But I didn't explode. Not yet. I swallowed the poison, looked at her and smiled. A bitter smile. A smile she didn't understand. For the next few days, I acted as if nothing had happened. I kissed her in the morning, I caressed her face, I told her I loved her. I made plans, like we did before. But my every word was poison disguised as affection. She didn't suspect it. How could I? She was comfortable in her lie, sure I would never find out. But I knew. And more than that, I expected. And then, the next night, it happened. Her phone rang, and instinctively I looked at the screen. An unknown number. But I knew exactly who it was. His face changed, his expression became tense for a second, but then he tried to hide it. He picked up his cell phone and left the room to answer it. I pretended I didn't see. I continued watching TV, as if nothing was happening. As if my world wasn't falling apart. But I knew. I knew. The following nights were the same. She said she was going to her friend's house, but I no longer needed to follow her. I already knew the destination. I already knew her steps better than she knew herself. Each night, my contempt grew. My anger burned. But I expected. I waited for the right moment. And then, the day came. The day fate decided to act cruelly. The day everything changed. She left the house as always, with her fake smile and her empty kiss. But that night, something was different. Something in the air told me that the game was about to change. And turned. The next morning, the phone rang. But it wasn't her. It wasn't the lie. It was reality, knocking on the door with a brutality that not even I expected. The voice on the other end of the line was deep, serious. "You need to come here, it's about your wife." My chest tightened. My blood ran cold. There was a long silence. Then, the words that changed everything. "The man she was with, he's dead." I was paralyzed. My mind refused to process. What do you mean, dead? What had happened? How was this possible? Did she know? Was she involved? I needed answers. I needed to understand. But more than that, I needed to see it with my own eyes. What started as a betrayal turned into a nightmare. A nightmare that no one could escape. And I knew, at that moment, that nothing would be the same again. Welcome to the channel. Here, we do not support any type of betrayal. The stories you will hear are fictional, but they carry an undeniable truth. Betrayal destroys lives, corrodes relationships and leaves deep scars. Our goal is to show the devastating impact of disloyalty and how each choice has its consequences. Now, prepare. What are you about to hear? It's not just a story, it's a reality check. Happy listening. The clock said 6:45 p.m. when Daniel arrived home after another long day at work. He pushed the door open with his shoulder while holding a small bag from a local bakery, where he had quickly stopped by to buy the bread that Laura liked. Since the beginning of the marriage, he had become accustomed to these small gestures, believing that they were what kept the relationship alive. The soft smell of lavender that always permeated the room was still there, mixed with the aroma of scented candles that his wife loved to spread around the house. He took a deep breath. It was good to be there, it was good to have a home. The room was spotless, as always. The furniture was modern, hand-picked by Laura, who has always had a special talent for decoration. The perfectly aligned cushions on the leather sofa, the linen curtains swaying gently in the evening breeze, the warm lights illuminating the room with a welcoming tone. It was a house built with love, with plans, with promises of a future that seemed unshakable. But something there was different, even if Daniel couldn't say exactly what. Maybe it was just the weight of tiredness, maybe it was just the fact that lately it seemed harder to see Laura with the same closeness as before. He called her name but got no immediate response. He went to the kitchen, where he found the table set for two, a detail that should have calmed him, but that, somehow, left him uneasy. There was an effort there, a care, but also a silence that didn't match the dinners they had in the past, when she welcomed him with long kisses and excited questions about his day. He placed the bag on the table and turned around, finding Laura leaning against the doorframe, watching him with a half-smile on her lips. Her brown eyes had an indecipherable shine, a mix of tenderness and something else that Daniel couldn't decipher. She wore a light blue dress, loose on her body, her blonde hair falling in perfect waves over her shoulders. "You took a long time today," she said, her voice soft, but without the curiosity from before. "I caught a bit of traffic," he replied, trying to get rid of the uncomfortable feeling that accompanied him. "I stopped by the bakery. I brought your favorite bread." She smiled lightly, walking over to him and taking the bag gently. "Thank you. I thought we could have dinner together today, like before." Daniel nodded, pulling out a chair and sitting down. I liked these peaceful nights, these shared meals. But at the same time, he couldn't deny that there was an invisible distance between them. Small changes in Laura's behavior that he couldn't name. She still smiled, still prepared his food, still worried about the little details around the house. But for some reason, there was something different in his eyes, in the way he ran his fingers across the glass, the way he looked away when he stared at her for too long. Dinner continued amid superficial conversations. Laura talked about her routine, mentioned the friends she had been out with in the last few days, commented on how she was organizing an event at work. Daniel listened, but his mind wandered. There was a tiredness built up in his shoulders, not just physical but emotional. He always believed that their marriage was solid, that they had built something strong enough to withstand the test of time. But over the past few months, I felt like I was holding on to an increasingly thin thread, as if a strong wind could snap it all at once. After dinner, he watched her get up and take the dishes to the sink. His slender body moved with the lightness of someone who knew he was being watched. Laura had always been like this, self-assured, elegant even in small gestures. But this time, there was something more. She turned to him, leaning on the counter. "I'm going out later. I'm going to Amanda's house. Let's have a girls' night." Daniel nodded slowly. "You've been seeing each other a lot lately." She tilted her head, as if trying to understand what was behind the sentence. "Yes, we do. It's good to take your mind off things, you know. Relax." He tried not to show that something inside him twisted at that answer. Laura had always had close friends, she always liked going out to talk, but lately she seemed to spend more time outside than at home. And when he was there, his mind seemed to be somewhere else. When she left, the house fell into silence. Daniel stayed in the room for a few moments, feeling the weight of her absence. He tried to concentrate on work, check some emails, watch something on television. But nothing could take away the uncomfortable feeling that was growing inside him. The emptiness next to her on the sofa, the absence of her perfume in the air, the echo of her last words. He couldn't explain what it was. "I just felt it." The following days followed the same pattern. Laura went out often, and he tried to convince himself that it was just a phase, that she would go back to being the woman he knew. But the truth was that something was slipping through his fingers, and he didn't know how to hold it back. Every conversation seemed too superficial, every kiss seemed too quick, every "I love you" sounded less convincing than before. He watched her sleep, trying to find some answer in the features of her face. Some clue that this was all just in his head. But deep down, he knew. Something was wrong. Something that he still couldn't see, but that, sooner or later, would come to light. Daniel woke up before the alarm clock went off. His eyes were open, fixed on the ceiling of the room, while his mind incessantly hammered the same thoughts that had haunted him for days. Laura slept next to him, facing away from him, her body slightly curved, as if unconsciously creating a space between them. Her breathing was calm, serene, oblivious to the turmoil that was growing inside him. He turned to the side, observing her in the dim light of the room, trying to find in her silhouette some explanation, some trace of the woman that, for so long, he believed he knew so well. But all he found was a cold, uncomfortable feeling, an emptiness that grew with each night she returned late, with each smile that no longer seemed to be meant for him, with each touch that became rarer and rarer. He closed his eyes, trying to ignore the tightness in his chest. He was tired of trying to convince himself that it was all in his head. The excuses were becoming predictable. The nights, with friends, the unexpected meetings, the calls she answered away from him, the moments of distraction when she seemed lost in thoughts that he couldn't reach. He had already silently accepted that something was wrong, but now he needed more. "I needed the truth, no matter how much it hurt." That afternoon, while he was at work, something inside him made him pull out his cell phone and open the tracking app they had installed years ago when Laura had her car stolen. It was a habit he rarely used, a forgotten tool deep in his phone's settings. But that day, his fingers slid across the screen without hesitation, guided by a primal instinct, an internal warning he could no longer ignore. Her name appeared on the map, a small pulsing blue dot indicating her location. But the address that appeared on the screen made his heart stop for a second. It wasn't Amanda's house. It wasn't a restaurant, nor a shopping mall, nor any place that made sense for a meeting between friends. It was a discreet hotel, away from the busy areas, hidden between dimly lit streets. His stomach dropped, and for a moment he hesitated, hoping it was a mistake, that the app was out of date, that there was some logical explanation. But deep down, he already knew. I always knew. His body moved before his mind fully processed it. He took his car keys and left work without even saying goodbye to his colleagues. On the way, his mind spiraled, projecting every possible scene. Each scenario was worse than the other. He was gripping the steering wheel tightly, his fingers shaking slightly, adrenaline pumping strong. The traffic felt like a taunt, a cruel test of his patience, every red light a reminder that he might be arriving too late. But too late for what? What did he expect to find? What would he do when he saw it? When he parked a few blocks away from the hotel, he felt his chest rise and fall unevenly. He stayed there for a few minutes, staring at the entrance, trying to muster the strength to get out of the car. But then, you saw. First, Laura's car, parked in the side parking lot. And then, the glass door of the hotel opening. Time seemed to slow down when he saw Laura leaving. I wasn't alone. She smiled. But it wasn't just any smile, it wasn't the smile he saw at home, the tired smile, the automatic smile. It was a genuine smile, full of life, of desire, of something he hadn't seen in her for a long time. A man accompanied her. Tall, well-dressed, a touch of intimacy in the way he kept his hand at the small of her back. It was a subtle gesture, almost imperceptible to anyone passing by on the street without paying attention. But for Daniel, it was a punch in the gut. He knew that touch. He had already done it countless times with her. But now, it was another man. He felt his body freeze, his muscles tense, his mouth dry. He watched as they walked together to the man's car, while Laura laughed at something he said, leaning slightly towards him, as if the world around him had disappeared. And then came the final blow. The man held her face with both hands, bringing her close. Their lips met. It wasn't a stolen kiss, it wasn't a mistake, it wasn't a slip. It was a deep, intimate kiss, the kind of kiss two lovers share when they are alone, when there is no fear, when there is no guilt. And Laura gave herself to him. Daniel closed his eyes for a moment, as if he hoped that when he opened them, everything had been a mistake. But when he looked again, the scene was still there, stuck in front of his eyes like a knife through raw flesh. His chest tightened so much that for a moment he thought he couldn't breathe. The world around him became a blur, and all that was left was that moment, that betrayal staring him in the face. He didn't know how long he stayed there, watching, not moving, not breathing. When he finally felt his legs respond, he took a step back, then another, and without realizing it he was already inside the car, his hands shaking on the steering wheel. I couldn't process it, I couldn't understand it. It was real. It wasn't paranoia, it wasn't imagination. It was real. She was cheating on him. And she didn't seem sorry. His car remained parked there as he watched the two leave. His fingers gripped the steering wheel tightly, his knuckles white. His heart beat in his chest like a mismatched drum. There was anger, there was pain, but most of all, there was the certainty that everything he knew up until that point was over. The wedding, the memories, the promises, the plans. Nothing else existed. Just a growing emptiness, a darkness that was beginning to spread within him. But then, something changed. Something inside him woke up. He didn't know exactly what it was, he just felt like the pain was giving way to something more. Something he couldn't name, but that burned in his chest with a different intensity. And he knew he couldn't just go home and pretend nothing happened. Not this time. Not after what you saw. And it was at that moment that he made a decision. A decision that would change everything. The night was heavy when Laura entered the house. She closed the door slowly, her heels echoing on the wooden floor as she crossed the room in silence. His body felt light, relaxed, and his face still had a subtle glow of pleasure. But as she took a few more steps inside, she felt something in the air, a strange presence, as if she were being watched. His heart accelerated instinctively, and before he could react, he heard Daniel's voice break the silence in the room. He was sitting in the armchair, in the darkest corner of the room, with a glass of wine in his hand. His eyes never left her, and in the dim glow of the lights, there was something about him that Laura didn't recognize. The way he looked at her, the unsettling stillness he exuded, the way he slowly swirled the liquid in the glass without really seeming interested in it. "Good evening," his voice was calm, controlled, and it made her swallow hard. She forced a smile, trying to keep it natural. "Are you still awake? I thought you were already asleep. I was waiting for you." She hesitated, feeling a lump tighten in her throat. He never stayed up waiting. He never looked at her like that. Something was wrong. "You took your time today," he continued, getting up slowly, walking towards her with slow steps. Laura licked her lips, trying to hide her discomfort. "We were talking, the girls wanted to vent about some things. I couldn't wait for the hour to pass." Daniel laughed softly. Not an amused laugh. A bitter, heavy laugh. "That's good," he murmured, stopping a few steps away from her. Her eyes searched every detail of her face, every expression she tried to keep under control. "You've always been very good at listening to other people's problems. And also at hiding yours." She frowned, crossing her arms defensively. "What's going on, Daniel? Do you really want me to say it?" He raised his eyebrows, his eyes burning into her with something that seemed ready to explode. "Do you really want me to say out loud what you already know?" Laura's heart skipped a beat. She opened her mouth to respond, but he didn't give her time. "Because I know, Laura. I know." His voice thickened, filled with something that made her instinctively flinch. "I know where you've been. I know who you've been with. I know everything." She froze. A chill ran up his spine, his hands felt cold. "Daniel. No." He slammed the glass on the table next to him, the glass shattering, and Laura took a step back. "There's no excuse. There's no explanation. I saw it. With my own eyes. You and him. In that hotel. You know exactly what I'm talking about." The silence that followed was suffocating. The air between them was sharp, heavy, a battlefield where only one would emerge unscathed. She tried to open her mouth, to say something, but no words came out. His chest rose and fell rapidly, and then weakness took over his legs. He felt the guilt crush his bones. Daniel ran his hand through his hair, laughing again, a lifeless laugh. "I thought you would at least have the decency to deny it. But look, you can't even." I can explain." He took a step forward, and Laura felt his presence like a storm about to break. "Explain what? Explain why you destroyed everything. Explain why you spent months lying, saying you were going to your friend's house while throwing yourself into someone else's arms." She felt the bitter taste in her mouth. Every word was a blade ripping through his skin. "It wasn't like that, it wasn't like that, so tell me, Laura." His voice was lower, but even more dangerous. "Tell me how it was." She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling her head spin. "I didn't want to hurt you," he laughed again. "But he did it. He did it perfectly." Silence dragged between the two like a ghost haunting every corner of that house. Laura took a deep breath, trying to pick up the pieces of what had been broken, but there was nothing to be saved. It was then that Daniel picked up something from the table and threw it to her. Laura held on instinctively, but as she looked down at her hands, she felt the ground open beneath her feet. It was a photo. A photo of the man she was with the night before. But it wasn't just any photo. It was an image captured from a security camera, with a black stripe in the upper corner, showing the police logo. His body froze. "He's dead," Daniel said, each word cutting like a razor. The shock was so great that Laura stumbled backwards. His lips parted, but no sound came out. What? Daniel was watching her now with a cold gaze, as if he was waiting to see how far this would go. "He was found this morning. In the same hotel where you were." The air left Laura's lungs, and her vision blurred. "No, no, that can't be," "But it is." She was shaking, holding the photo with stiff fingers. His mind raced, trying to find some explanation, something that made sense. "Did you know this before I arrived?" Daniel crossed his arms, his eyes piercing. "I got the call right before you walked through that door. I thought it was only fair for you to know before the police come knocking." The words fell on her like a crushing weight. The room started to spin. The man she was with. The man with whom he gave himself up, with whom he shared forbidden moments. Now he was dead. And the worst? She had no idea how this had happened. Laura felt the ground crumble beneath her feet. His breathing was uneven, the image in the photo still caught between his trembling fingers, as if burning his skin. His heart was hammering inside his chest, and Daniel's voice still echoed in his mind. Dead. The man he had been with the night before was now dead. The reality of what that meant fell upon her like a crushing weight, making it impossible to move, impossible to reason. His eyes returned to Daniel, looking for some answer, some confirmation that this wasn't a nightmare. But his gaze was a cold storm, unwavering, filled with something she didn't know if it was anger or pure contempt. How did this happen? His voice was choked, as if he was trying to draw air into his lungs, but couldn't. Daniel tilted his head slightly, watching every expression that crossed her face, as if he was studying her reaction, as if he was waiting for something. The police haven't released details yet, but they said the body was found this morning. In the same hotel where you stayed with him. Laura felt her stomach drop. His hands went to his mouth, trying to contain the urge to vomit that rose in his throat. What did that mean? Who would have done this? She blinked several times, trying to cling to any line of logical thought, but everything was chaos inside her. Do you think I had something to do with this? His voice came out louder than he intended, almost a scream. Daniel didn't respond right away. He just watched her, his dark eyes penetrating deep into her, as if he could see beyond what she showed. His silence was worse than any accusation. I don't know, Laura, she finally said, crossing her arms, her expression filled with something that made her shudder. But the police will want to know. Laura's eyes widened. A real dread settled over her skin, as if someone had doused her in ice-cold water. The police. They would look for her. They would question her. She was there, at the crime scene. Did that make her suspicious? She ran her hands through her hair, pacing from side to side like a cornered animal. His chest rose and fell rapidly. The mind trying to find some explanation, but there was nothing. Nothing made sense. I need to think, he murmured, his thoughts running over each other. Daniel stepped forward, his presence so intense that she almost tripped as she backed away. Think about what, Laura? How are you going to get away with this? How are you going to hide the mess under the rug? Her eyes widened, the pain of those words feeling like a physical blow. That's not it. I didn't do anything. Do you think I? He laughed, a low, acid laugh. I think you spent months lying to me, so it wouldn't exactly be surprising to find out you have more secrets than I realized. The words hit her like knives. She felt tears sting her eyes, but she didn't allow them to fall. Do you want to blame me, Daniel? His voice trembled, but there was something more there, something that came from the desperation of someone who was being dragged into the abyss. Good. Do it. Because it's easier than looking at everything that got us here, isn't it? Daniel clenched his fists. There was something about him that seemed ready to explode, but instead he took a deep breath, looking away for a moment. It doesn't matter anymore, he murmured, his voice filled with something bitter. The point is, you were with a man who is now dead. And sooner or later, the police are going to come knocking on your door. Laura felt her body shudder with this reality. He tried to remember the night before, anything that could indicate that this man was in danger, that there was something wrong, but there was nothing. He was fine. He smiled, touched his face, talked about trivial things. How could someone like that be dead just a few hours later? She felt tears roll down her face, but she didn't allow herself to break down. I need to know what happened. I need to understand. Daniel narrowed his eyes. And how do you intend to do that? She looked at him, and at that moment, she knew she couldn't wait and see what this would happen. I'll find out. The sentence left his mouth before he could even think about its weight. Daniel laughed lightly, but there was no humor there. Just disbelief. And what exactly are you going to do, Laura? Interrogate the cops. Look for evidence. You don't even know where to start. She took a deep breath. Maybe not. But I know I'm not going to sit here and wait for someone to decide to blame me for something I didn't do. Daniel licked his lips, looking away for a moment before looking back at her. You know this could end very badly, don't you? She knew. But there was no choice. Hours later, Laura found herself driving through the city, her mind a whirlwind of possibilities. I needed to find answers before it was too late. I couldn't just wait and see how the situation would unfold. If she didn't step forward, she might get caught up in something she didn't even understand. And then, when he least expected it, his phone rang. The name that appeared on the screen made your breath catch. It was the police. She swallowed hard before answering, her hands shaking slightly on the steering wheel. Lady Laura. The voice on the other end was formal, but carried an obvious weight. Try. We need you to come to the police station to answer some questions. The chill that ran down his spine was unbearable. About what? The pause that came next lasted only 2 seconds, but for her, it was an eternity. About the death of Lucas Oliveira. The name hit Laura like a punch. She felt the air escape her lungs. Can we count on your collaboration? She knew she had no choice. We'll be there soon. The click of the phone ending the call resounded in his mind like a verdict. The game had started. And she had no idea how she would get out of it. The police station was plunged into an uncomfortable silence when Laura arrived. Every step she took echoed through the narrow hallway, the sound of her heels seeming louder than usual, as if the weight of the situation was amplified with each movement. The air inside was charged, heavy, permeated with tension. His hands were cold, even though outwardly he tried to maintain his composure. Her eyes scanned the environment, catching curious looks from some police officers, murmurs that didn't reach her ears, but that she knew were about her. She felt exposed, as if she were about to be thrown against a wall and forced to confess something she didn't even understand. One of the detectives called her name and gestured for her to follow him. Laura took a deep breath, gathering what little strength she had left, and entered the interrogation room. The environment was suffocating, with cold concrete walls and a metal table in the center. The detective waiting for her had an impassive look, a notebook open in front of her, the pen twirling between his fingers. He didn't smile, he didn't try to ease the tension, he just stared at her for a moment before speaking. Mrs. Laura, thank you for attending. As you may know, we are investigating the death of Lucas Oliveira and you were one of the last people to be with him before the incident. The name sounded like a hammer hitting his skull. Luke. The man she had met, the man who was now dead. Laura swallowed, her mouth was dry, but she forced herself not to look away. I don't know what happened. His voice sounded weaker than he intended, but he tried to continue. I really don't know. We checked out of the hotel and he seemed fine. The detective tilted his head, writing something down in his notebook, and then looked back at her. And after that? She licked her lips, feeling the pressure increase. He walked me to the car. We talked for a few minutes and then he got into his own car and drove away. That was the last time I saw him. The detective kept his expression neutral, as if analyzing every detail of what she said, every movement, every hesitation. Didn't you notice anything unusual? No strange behavior? Anyone watching them? Laura blinked quickly, trying to pull something from her memory that could answer that question, but nothing seemed to make sense. Nothing. He was normal. Maybe a little distracted, but nothing that attracted attention. The detective leaned forward slightly, interlacing his fingers on the table. And what was your relationship like? The question made her freeze. Relatio, his voice trailed off for a second. We're just acquaintances. The detective raised an eyebrow, eyes boring into hers as if he saw beyond her words. Only acquaintances. The silence that followed was unbearable. Laura felt her heart racing, cold sweat forming at the base of her neck. We saw each other from time to time. His voice was low, almost a whisper. The detective continued to stare at her, and then opened a folder in front of him, pulling out some photos and pushing one of them towards Laura. The image was clear. She and Lucas. Their lips pressed together, the moment captured by the hotel cameras. The air disappeared from his lungs. So you were just acquaintances? The detective asked, without looking away. Laura felt the heat rise to her face, her breathing became short, and for a moment, she thought she would faint. I can explain. The detective didn't respond, just waited. Laura ran her hands over her face, feeling despair rising within her. We met a few times. But that has nothing to do with what happened to him. Maybe, the detective said, leaning back. But the fact is that the last person he met was you. The words pounded in his mind. Everything was closing in around her. Does that mean I'm a suspect? The detective remained silent for a moment too long. We just want to understand the situation. Know if there's anything you haven't told us. Laura felt her body stiffen. She was already in the middle of the storm, and at any moment she could be swept away to a place from which there would be no return. The questions continued for a time she couldn't measure. The detective wanted details, times, anything that would fit the puzzle pieces together. But she had no answers. I didn't know what happened after they said goodbye. He didn't know who might want to hurt him. All I knew was that, somehow, I was trapped in this situation, with no way out. When she was finally released, Laura left the police station feeling her legs were shaking. His chest hurt, his head throbbed. Every step was an effort. But the worst part was going out and finding Daniel on the other side of the street, leaning against the car, his arms crossed, his cold gaze fixed on her. She paused for a moment, not knowing what to expect. He just watched her, not moving, not saying anything. She walked slowly towards him, feeling the weight of the silence. You're enjoying watching this, aren't you? His voice was bitter, full of exhaustion. Daniel blinked slowly, but didn't smile. No, Laura. I just want to know what this will lead to. His tone made your chest tighten. Do you still think I might have done something? He looked away for a moment, as if pondering the answer, and when he looked back at her, his voice was lower, but sharp. I don't know what you're capable of anymore. The words hit her like a punch. She felt something break inside her. Without saying anything else, he got into the car and drove away, leaving her there, alone, staring into space. And it was at that moment that Laura realized that, regardless of how this story ended, one thing was certain. She had already lost everything. Laura walked aimlessly after Daniel left her there, standing still, staring into space. Her legs seemed to weigh 3 times as much, and each step was dragging, as if the ground itself wanted to pull her down. The cold night air bit into his skin, but it couldn't keep away the wave of suffocating heat that burned in his chest. What was left of her? The moment he left that police station, he realized that his life had become a field of debris. The marriage destroyed, the reputation tarnished, and now, involved in a police investigation that she had no idea how to get out of. Everything that was once safe now seemed to crumble in his hands. She stopped at the corner, her arms crossed as if trying to protect herself from the wind, but the cold she felt wasn't coming from outside. Her phone vibrated in her bag, making her wince. For a second, he hesitated to look, afraid it was another police officer, another question, another confirmation that his world was falling apart. But when he picked up his cell phone, he saw that it was Amanda, one of the few friends he still had left, or at least that's what he believed. "Laura, where are you?" The voice sounded worried, but there was a tone of caution, as if Amanda chose each word carefully. I don't know. I'm walking aimlessly." Her own voice was broken, and she bit her lip to contain the trembling. "I saw the news," Amanda said, hesitantly. "About Lucas." Laura closed her eyes tightly, as if she could force the words out. Of course it was already everywhere. By now, everyone should know. "I need to understand what is happening," Laura murmured, the pain in her voice. "I was with him, yes, but he was fine. He walked away, got in his car and drove away. How can someone die a few hours later without anything seeming wrong?" There was silence on the other end of the line. "Amanda?" Her friend's breathing became audible, as if she was about to say something she didn't want to say. "There's something you don't know." Laura's body froze. "What?" Amanda hesitated for a moment, but then let out a long sigh. "Lucas had enemies." Laura's heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about?" "He wasn't who you thought, Laura. I heard from other people that he was involved with dangerous people. Illegal things. And from what I heard, he owed money to the wrong people." Laura's throat closed. That doesn't make sense," he whispered, feeling his entire body throbbing. "Yes, it does. And now, you're in the middle of it," Amanda said, her voice filled with genuine fear. Laura felt her legs weaken. It wasn't possible. Lucas never mentioned any of this. He never showed fear, never showed signs that he was being threatened. But what if he had hidden it from her? What if she had been just a piece within something much bigger? "You need to be careful," Amanda continued. "If he owed someone money, and they believe you know more than you're saying, you could be in danger." Laura's world spun. What started as a forbidden affair was turning into a nightmare. "Do you think someone might be after me?" Amanda's hesitation was enough to answer the question. Laura hung up the call and felt her breathing quicken. For the first time, he realized that it wasn't just a matter of clearing his name or proving that he had nothing to do with Lucas' death. Now, your life could be at risk. She looked around, feeling watched, as if suddenly every shadow on the street hid something else. Her fingers shook as she tried to call Daniel, but hesitated before completing the call. He wouldn't answer. And even if he answered, what would he say? He no longer trusted her. But at that moment, she realized that, whether she liked it or not, Daniel was the only person who could help her. With quick steps, he walked to the point where the taxis were parked and got into the first one he found. The trip seemed to last an eternity. When he finally arrived in front of the house, he saw the lights were off. He took a deep breath and got out of the car, the sound of his heels echoing on the asphalt. He rang the doorbell and waited. Time dragged on before the door opened. Daniel looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "What do you want, Laura?" She took a deep breath, trying to maintain her composure. "I need to talk to you." He crossed his arms. "We have nothing more to say. You want to hate me? Fine. But I'm serious. I'm in danger." Daniel frowned, but still kept his gaze hardened. "Danger?" he repeated, with disbelief in his voice. Laura bit her lip before continuing. "Lucas wasn't just a man I was dating. He was involved in something big. And now that he's dead, I don't know if they're going to come after me thinking I know something. The anger in Daniel's eyes mixed with something else. A flash of concern. But he didn't say anything right away. You want me to do what? Help me. Help me get out of this. I don't have anyone else. Daniel ran a hand through his hair, looking away, as if he was fighting something inside him. I shouldn't care, he muttered, almost to himself. But he cared. Even after everything, even with the anger, the betrayal, the contempt, he still couldn't just turn away and let her sink alone. He let out a long sigh. Come in. Laura felt her body relax for a second, but she knew that was just the beginning. Because now, it wasn't just a broken marriage. It was a life at stake. And time was running against her. Daniel looked at Laura sitting on the sofa in front of him. Her eyes were sunken, tired, reflecting the weight of fear she carried. Her hands shook slightly as she tried to hold the glass of water he had given her minutes before. The silence between the two was dense, suffocating, as if each unspoken word increased the distance that already existed between them. No matter how much he tried to deny it, no matter how much he told himself he didn't care anymore, he still felt that protective instinct wanting to override the anger. But protect what? A woman who destroyed their marriage. A woman who lied to him, who slept with someone else and now, ironically, ran into his arms asking for help. He stood up, rubbing his hands over his face before crossing his arms, looking at her as if trying to see beyond the betrayal, beyond the disappointment, beyond the version he built of her after what he discovered. Are you sure you're being followed? His voice was firmer than he intended, and Laura looked up hesitantly, as if she knew that if she was lying, he would see right through her. Yes, he replied, biting his lip. Ever since I left the police station, I feel like someone is watching me. I know it sounds like paranoia, but the feeling doesn't go away. I look in the rearview mirror and see the same cars, the same silhouettes. I can't be alone. Daniel exhaled heavily, feeling a knot tighten in his chest. As much as I wanted to push her away, ignore everything and let her resolve herself, I couldn't just leave her there, vulnerable. Staying here won't solve anything, he said, looking at her. If you're really being followed, then you need to get out of town. Disappear for a while until they find out who's behind this. You can't just wait and see what happens. Laura closed her eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the reality of what he was saying. But running away meant admitting that she was completely alone. And somehow, that conclusion destroyed her inside. Will you come with me? The question came out before he could stop it. Daniel let out a short, bitter laugh. No, Laura. You'll have to face this alone. The words fell on her like a blow. But it was the truth. She had already asked for too much. He had already given in too much. She lowered her head, feeling her eyes burn. I knew this was the right thing to do, but it hurt. It hurt to realize that, at the end of it all, he was really gone, not just physically, but emotionally. And maybe he would never come back. I can help you get a safe place to stay for a while, he continued, his voice lower but not soft. But after that, every choice will be yours. She nodded slowly. There was nothing more to be said. That same night, Daniel found a remote cabin in a neighboring town. He took his keys and drove with Laura there, the silence accompanying them throughout the journey. When they finally stopped, he turned off the car and looked at her one last time. That should be enough for now, he said, handing him an envelope with money and fake documents. If you need anything else, don't look for me. Just move on. She held the envelope tightly, her fingers clenching the paper as if it were the only real thing left. I wanted to say something, to thank, to ask for forgiveness, but the words died before they could be formed. Daniel got out of the car and took a few steps back. Take care of yourself, was all he said before turning his back and walking away. She stood there, watching as he disappeared down the road. And at that moment, I knew that, regardless of everything, this was the end. The true end. In the following days, the police managed to uncover what really happened to Lucas. He was murdered by a loan shark to whom he owed money. Investigations confirmed that Laura had no involvement in the crime. But that didn't change the fact that his life would never be the same. Daniel moved on with his life, rebuilding what was left of himself after the betrayal. He met another woman some time later, someone who didn't carry lies in her eyes, someone who didn't make him question every word he said. Little by little, he relearned to trust, to love, to give his heart without fear. But most of all, he learned to never ignore the signs again. Laura, on the other hand, was never able to fully recover. He spent the next few years wandering from city to city, running away from the ghosts of the past, the wrong choices, the man he lost forever. Because cheating doesn't just destroy a marriage. She destroys everything. If you made it this far, comment what you thought of this story. Your opinion is very important. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. And remember, we do not support any type of betrayal.